Welcome to this new episode of the Educators Clinic, and we have Jaakko Skantsi. Welcome, Jaakko.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
It's nice to be here.
Thank you so much for being in Riyadh. And our first question always is, who is Jaakko Skantsi?
I think that's a bit trick question in my opinion. So it depends who asks that, but I would like to see myself as a father. Although lately I have been away from home a bit too much, I guess. But the way the Finnish society is set up, so when the boys were small, I stayed home with them for almost 2 years while my wife was working. So that was important time for me to bond with my kids. And nowadays they are, well, quite grown up already. So parenthood becomes a bit different at that stage. It's interesting time nonetheless at home, but it's interesting time at work as well. So my background is in education. I've been an educator for over 20 years now. In Finland, if you want to become a teacher, you need to apply for a master's degree program. So I actually started with engineering, master's in science degree first. And after about 1 year, I realized that I'd like to apply for the education program instead. And I think it was love at first sight. So it's been a really interesting ride ever since. I worked as a principal, as a teacher, a classroom teacher, as an English teacher, as a teacher trainer as well. So we have this interesting setup for schools in Finland who train teachers. So basically any university that has teacher training program, the master's level program, they own a school of their own. And it's staffed by the university. Mentor teachers work for the university, and also the academic staff comes to the teacher training school as well. So I stayed there for a bit as well. So
excellent career. Wow. So if I would ask you to name maybe one or two things that really you are passionate about being a teacher or in education at large.
In my opinion, the thing that I miss from classroom most is kind of really meeting your students, getting to know them, seeing how they grow, facing the unknown together with them. So I think that is a big thing, right? At least in my opinion. You can see how they grow up so fast, how they learn. They are like sponges, so they, especially if you can make it interesting for them, they are really, really, they can't help themselves. They really get excited, and it's really nice to watch that as well. But also kind of through the difficult times as well. So when there are difficulties with whatever they are, facing them together, involving the parents, having meetings with them. Once you kind of can see together the path or the next step that should be taken, that's nice as well.
Absolutely. You mentioned two keywords here for me at least. One is getting to know them.
Yes.
And two is making the class or the lesson interesting enough.
Yes.
I mean, these two words are easier said than done.
So making the classroom interesting for the learners, there's been a lot of talk about personalized learning. There's been a lot of on a global scale. But then again, many systems set quite strict kind of framework for the learning outcomes. And then again, there might be the question of what kind of methods should be used and so forth. Usually, the most interesting lessons for students are those where they actually, when you can design the lessons together with them in somehow. So whether it's a project, whether it's just, regular math class, it's about kind of giving them a voice as well, understanding what really makes them interested in something, utilizing not just the classroom, but the whole school building, also outside areas, going to the forest, for example, for math lesson. That's quite interesting as well. This is, of course, there's a social context to this as well as environmental context. So you can't do that everywhere in Finland either. So, and I think the key question here is, how is the local curriculum developed? Are the learners involved? Are the parents involved? How does it take into account the local context? You know, if you go to suburban school in Helsinki metropolitan area, it's quite different from a school in Lapland where, you know, literally the school is surrounded by lakes and forest and stuff like that.
Absolutely. The surrounding environment helps the curriculum as well.
But you need to, whatever kind of surrounding you have, you need to utilize that for learning.
100%.
So again, the Finnish approach is the National Agency for Education provides the core curriculum, so the framework to which all the school education providers, so mainly municipalities, cities, municipalities, they need to follow. They need to form their own curriculum based on that framework. So you can think the framework as a foundation, and then you build the local bits on top of that.
And so that's how you get to contextualize it and personalize it.
Indeed.
All right, that's really interesting. Maybe this delves or maybe guides us into the following question, which I believe maybe many of our audience now would be waiting to and so much eager to listen to the answer to. What is so special about Finnish education?
There are a couple of things that I think are applicable regardless of where you educate students. I always have to highlight that you can't take the kind of the Finnish school as such and drop it somewhere else. It just doesn't work like that. And there are misconceptions like, okay, let's take the Finnish curriculum and just use that, and halas, everything will be fine. No, it really doesn't work that way either. So, but during the past, say, 50 years, ever since we had kind of a major overhaul of our basic education in 1970s, the approach has been such that we need to take the best researched and evidence-based models from abroad, and also, base our teacher training programs, research-based teacher training programs, so that the teachers are actually researchers themselves as well. So you need, once you have the master's degree, and some of them, go to PhD level as well. It's about actually following. It's quite simple. There's lots of research on how learning takes place, what motivates students, what kind of assessment is actually, is it assessment for learning or assessment for something else? So we always say, if you measure something really strictly, that guides the learning process quite a bit, or the teaching process at least.
Counter effect.
Yeah. So far, I think in Finland we are interested on research and evidence-based pedagogy and learning. So, and we want to kind of utilize that for the future as well, because the school usually is quite conservative, and changes happen quite slowly. Nonetheless, we need to be able to reflect today and the future in our schools as well, and not just do some magic tricks, but base that on research.
Understood. So there are some aspects that we read about Finnish education, and that's first that comes to mind is the late start in the early years program, or in the primary or elementary program. So why and how does that affect and have a positive impact on students' learning?
Okay, let's take a concrete example, early literature and reading skills. In Finland, the pre-primary year, that is nowadays mandatory, but it's really play-based, to be honest. Usually, at that stage, it's all about just kind of recognizing the letters maybe and the sounds, but they don't go to the reading bit.
At the age of?
Age of 6. The proper reading starts at 7.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say about 80% of the students can read quite fluently after about 4 to 5 months at school.
And up until age of 6, they have nothing to do with school?
No, well, basically, not everyone participates in early childhood education. About 80% do, but those that do participate there, it's not about basic skills.
Okay.
No, it's about life skills. Mm-hmm. It's about taking care of yourself. It's about, in Finland, the students become really independent, not just at school, but elsewhere as well. So people are sometimes horrified when they come to Finland and it's autumn semester and the first graders, the 7-year-olds, they just go to school by themselves. They come to school by themselves. And the whole society reflects kind of this attitude where
autonomy and independence.
Yeah, autonomy and independence. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that they are left on their own device. So there's still possibilities to support the students. For example, if the parents work long days, there's kind of a afternoon clubs, but those are not academic ones usually. We want to give the kids quite a bit time to play, to together go in the forest or whatever. So
explore their talents as well.
Yeah, explore their talents as well, and just spend time with their friends, play outside, that sort of thing. Of course, that has changed somewhat now that there's more digital tools and so forth. So I'm not saying it's all like
right
the same as it was say 15 years ago, but nonetheless, you can still see a lot of kids kind of going about it themselves in groups and after schools. And the first 2 years, the weekly lesson hours are really low too. So about 22 hours per week. That's 4 or 5 hour days. Mm-hmm.
That's 50% of what it is in the Middle East, maybe.
It's yeah. And you can see charts on like how efficient people want to make all these kind of charts. I'm not a big fan of them, but if you want to see like input output, how many lessons and what are the outcomes, Finland is right there in number 1. And then you see nations where you have 50% more or even more when you take into account a ton of homework as well, and the learning outcomes aren't that much that good.
Jaakko, this leads me to something very, very famous about Finnish education, which is less is more.
Yes.
So understanding that less is more in terms of the number of proper or maybe contact hours of teaching and learning in the classroom, because also learning takes place aside from that, of course. Less is more in terms of less number of years of exposure of education, because there is a late start.
Well, there's a late start, but overall the education system is about as long.
Okay.
So basically the students just graduate a bit later in Finland.
Okay. And how does that affect their maybe opportunities for the job market? Do they feel that they are later than their fellow Europeans?
No, I don't think so. In my opinion, and then again, we have these quirks in our society as well. We have for males and boys, there's the conscription still in place in Finland. So there's another extra year added. You can do civil service as well. So it's not like you are forced in arms if you don't want to do that. But nonetheless, there's 1 extra year on top of the starting a bit late. So it's quite common for some female students go to military service as well. So, but it's quite common for the students to start their higher education career at the age of 19, 20.
All right. So there's also something very famous about Finnish education, which is the pathway for vocational learning and vocational pathway. Can you shed the light over that? Is it optional? Is it mandatory? How do you go about selections?
Okay, so basically the basic education that I mentioned starting the grade 1 ends at the end of grade 9, after which there are 2 pathways for the students. or in some cases you can kind of combine those two. You have the general upper secondary education, which is a bit more academic, kind of like high school, and then you have vocational education and training. And nowadays in Finland, it's about 50-50. So about 50% of the students choose the general upper secondary education, and about 50% choose the vocational education and training.
And I presume that the community looks up high to this vocational career as well, because there is no comparison between, for example, an engineer and a carpenter in the society, in the community.
It's. I mean, there's that.
Okay.
Definitely, and also because we value our. Okay, let me give you an example,
please.
So if you get your trade as an electrician in Finland, first of all, it's quite hard to get into that vocational education program to start with.
Why is it hard, if I may?
The people want it's based on, so there's a certain amount of openings for each qualification, and then being an electrician in Finland, well, first of all, even if you work for someone else, it pays quite well. So and then because we start kind of this, we have the transversal competencies. One of them is working life skills and entrepreneurship. So that starts already, it's like a vertical that starts already from year one onwards. So some of these people also start their own companies, businesses, they work for themselves. And I have friends who, you know, they've always made more money than I did, even though they never went beyond the vocational education qualification. And it's, you know, it's if you have that talent, if you have the skill,
right.
There's a lot of, you know, usually you want some specific electrician, you need to go to a queue, so it's a good thing.
Right.
The other point is that there are no dead ends. So with the vocational education qualification, you can also apply for example, University of Applied Sciences, get a bachelor degree. And if you want to continue the university, you can get a master's and even PhD. And I've sometimes used this as an example. So if you have an electric engineer with the bachelor degree, as you know, all over the world.
As the majority.
Yeah. Now, in Finland, you can go two ways to that. You can go to vocational, you can go to vocational, or you can go to the general upper secondary education. I would choose any time the person who was electrician first, because he knows, you know, hands-on how the things work.
The best of both.
Yeah, the best of both
ways. Wow, that's a very intriguing pathway as well.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to also the acceptance of the society for that to be, you know, accepted and at scale as well.
Of course.
In terms of having this in public education. And in terms of public education and private education, is there any kind of competition between national schools and international schools in terms of where parents would prefer more to put their children?
So first of all, most of the education in Finland is public on all levels. There's private actors, some private actors in early childhood education and care side. But when you go to the basic education and beyond, all of them are public, or if there are foundations or something like that, they still work on the same principle. So the funding comes from the government. It's based on the number of students. So if it's a municipality, the funding from the government is about 25%, and the municipality pays the 75% of the education cost. Education costs are not that high in Finland if you look at the OECD average numbers. So we are far from being most expensive. I think it's more expensive here in the GCC region for the even if you take the average. We have there's a choice for the parents, so they can choose if they don't want to put their child in the neighborhood school. They can take it to some other school by the school provider, so by the education provider. So in the case of, for example, Helsinki, where there are tens and tens of schools. If the parents want, they can say, we want to take our child to that school. However, most of the students go to their neighborhood school. There's for before mentioned reasons. If they go far away, that prolongs their day, and they probably cannot be that independent in their. Although we have public transportation system in place, it's a different story. We do have some streams. So people sometimes ask, for example, on high school. So there's always the question, how do you support the talented? That's the big thing. In Finland, we've been always concentrating more on making sure that no one falls behind. And there's actually interesting studies regarding group dynamics. If you separate the students by their kind of academic level, so you take the really good students, take them separately, and train them separately, the difference in their learning, there's some increase, but actually it's not that much. But what happens to the rest of the students, if you put them in the B or C category, that collapses. So there's a lot of, the research seems to point out, and this is what we want to follow in Finland as well, when you have mixed groups, you have those talented students, they actually uplift the others as well.
Challenge them enough.
Yeah.
Inclusion versus exclusion.
Yes.
Excellent. And also equity is something that, everyone has access to education at all levels.
Yes.
How do you find that, or how do you explain that happening in Finland?
As I mentioned, first of all, the differences between schools, even if you take the international comparisons like PISA or something, the differences between the schools are a lot smaller than within the school. So that's the starting point. In Finland, you more or less can trust that. The parents trust, the trust word comes up a lot in Finnish society as a whole, but the parents can trust that their neighborhood school for their student, for their kid, for their son or daughter is as good as the next one. So they don't need to worry about and kind of, because I've seen this kind of school shopping going on when I've been living abroad and when I've been around the world.
School shopping, that's a good way to put it.
Yes, and it doesn't necessarily always lead to good outcomes. Yeah. And people have really weird expectations on that as well.
Maybe also one of the reasons why would be the FOBO, fear of a better opportunity.
Yes.
Losing a better opportunity out there, or the neighbor or the other neighborhood.
Yes.
Which might cause longer time for commute and maybe extension, and that could affect the social and emotional well-being and the bonding of the child with the family.
Exactly. So that's one bit. The other bit is that regardless of your socio-economical background, regardless of what kind of support you need, by law, you should receive the same kind of support regardless where you are. There's probably going to be slight legislative changes in Finland in regards to our support system currently. We made an overhaul about 10 years ago. And now, based on, again, research and studies, we noticed that, there needs to be tweaks on how it's organized so that it will not lead to a situation where, for example, someone might fall off the grid or something.
Right. That's important. So, focusing on learning rather than testing.
Yes. Definitely.
Does that mean that you drop the summatives, you have all formatives, or you don't differentiate between assessment for learning and of learning? Is it learning chunks? Do you have high stakes assessments? What do you do about standardized assessments? How do you prepare your students for the universities and all these questions?
It's a good question. As I mentioned, I think learning as a process is quite a delicate thing. In my opinion, if you overdo the measuring, then it all kind of starts to revolve around that. And it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of effort. It's going to have an impact on how how the pupils view themselves as learners, as
human beings,
as human beings,
self-esteem.
and so forth. And self-esteem for sure. Okay, so during the first 9 years, during the basic education, after which they need to apply for one education pathway or the other, there are no standardized tests. There are summative tests, but again, those are done by the teachers. So when you're a teacher, you can do what kind of summative tests you want. They are not from a booklet. They are not, they are kind of course, some kind of templates that the teachers use. But then again, they are.
There's no stress around that.
No, and there is stress, of course, sometimes, but it depends. And one thing is, from the student well-being point of view, is of course kind of trying to lower that stress. So understanding why someone's stressed, what kind of impact does it have on a summative test, for example? Can we arrange it somehow differently so that the stress levels would go down, and also make the kind of assessment something that is embedded in the learning and is done partly by the students, and it has a big formative chunk in it as well, rather than having this kind of a really kind of tests that stress some of the students quite a bit.
Right. It's basically bonding the assessment to the learning process and not isolating it from the learning process.
Making it a loop, so you understand. So rather than waiting until the end and seeing, oh, he hasn't learned anything, having kind of, he needs support here, he needs support here.
Absolutely. Accumulative. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
So, no dead ends in the Finnish education system. Elaborate.
As I mentioned earlier, if you take the vocational path or the general upper secondary high school path, under which, by the way, there's one standardized test at the end of that. Regardless of which pathway you take, or whether you combine those studies, you can always, find yourself to whatever, you can continue your studies, or you can move sideways and do something a bit different. And during your working life, you can take side steps, or you can decide, I want to do something totally different. So, for example, I have friends who've been, they have had some profession earlier, and then they realized that actually I want to do something else. First thing, of course, come to mind, okay, am I missing something so that I could apply for example, master's degree program, or whatever. And then there's tools in place in Finland where you can take those bits. You can train yourself. You can study a bit more. You can go to evening studies while you work, so that you can apply for a program. Let's say you want to go to medical school. I've got friends who've done that as well. So at their 30s, they realized I really wanted to go to medical school, but when I was 20 or something, maybe I didn't study enough. I wasn't interested in advanced math and physics and chemistry that is required. So they can do that, and
So this is an actual implementation of lifelong learning.
Exactly. And actually vocational education plays a really important role in that. We have about, I would say, we have about 250, a bit under 300,000 vocational, Finland is a small country, vocational education students annually. Big chunk of them, so most of them are adults. So you have the basic qualification, that you want to become an electrician. Then you have, you can take kind of extra qualifications on top of that as well. Or let's take a thing called specialized vocational qualification. It can be on leadership, it can be on entrepreneurship, it can be on something else similar. So on those qualifications, about 20% of the students have a prior master's or PhD degree. So the vocational education and training is not just for the students when they are young. It's something that is utilized throughout their
Excellent. This gives opportunity for everyone to learn at any stage of their lives.
Let me give you an example.
Please.
So you work for, maybe you're a researcher. You come up with something new, spin-off. You want to start a company of your own. This is, of course, something that the societies want as well. Is it necessary for that person to do a full MBA? Or would it be enough for him or her to do the entrepreneurship training, for example? Because, what matters, not the title. If you're already a PhD in, quantum physics, why,
Exactly.
Why would you want to? Why would you go to MBA? You actually need certain modules,
micro credentials.
Yeah, you need certain modules or qualifications that actually help you to.
And they are valid and reliable.
They are valid and reliable, and there's coaching. There's all that stuff.
And I think this goes to the word that you mentioned. It's trust.
Yes.
If there is this kind of trust within the community, that they trust the degrees, they trust the education, which leads me to the other question that I wouldn't have ended this discussion without asking. Finland being ranked the top happiest country in the world, maybe for the past 5 years or so.
6
years, all right. And also it's the top on the ranking of the countries who are implementing the Sustainable Development 17 goals of the United Nations that are projected for 2030 objectives. And I believe we can be expanded as well. Why? Is it because of its a small country, or is it because of the educational system, or how?
It's a egg and hen, chicken and egg question.
Yeah.
So what comes first?
Exactly.
I think it's like a spinning wheel. Sometimes I think it like that. Or when let's take a better example. So when you put new wheels on your car, you need to balance them, right? And you need to add bits to the wheel. Now, if you just add something on one side, it becomes unbalanced, and then you need to add something on the other side or remove something. So I think all of these things actually support each other.
Right.
And it's hard to say what plays crucial role on what. We talked about the trust bits. I think that plays an important role, for example, on the happiness index. I would use content with your life. Your content with yourself, your content with your life.
Right. Satisfaction.
Yes, satisfaction in that sense, kind of not feeling like you missed out on something. And it also, because we have quite a high social security in place, so it's also about knowing that if things go right, I don't have to worry about ending up, somewhere.
Yeah.
There's all these different components.
Right.
As for the SDGs, if you ever have a chance to visit Finland, I think it comes down to the Finnish people usually have quite close connection with the nature. There's 5 million Finns, but I think there's probably 1 million getaway summer places. Usually quite, by the lake somewhere. You don't necessarily have even the basic kind of necessities, like some people don't even have electricity there or running water or something. You go there, you spend most of your holiday there, you have a connection with the nature. And when you have that, you kind of start to understand, for example, the, sustainability from the environmental point of view. Now, you mentioned, because the sustainability is a big thing, and I don't think we can cover all that, but there's social sustainability comes from, I believe, from the trust bit, from the kind of trusting that everything will be fine and being in contact with yourself. And then economic sustainability, I think in Finnish term comes from the fact that you don't disrupt the two others in the sake of for this economic sustainability. So if you forget one of these, if you think it's as a triangle, if you forget one of these, I think it will have an impact, for example, on the happiness question.
Right. I think it's like an intersection between all these circles.
Yes.
That leads to happiness as a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Wow. Isn't this what everyone seeks at the end of the day?
I think it is. I think that the big question is for everyone, including myself, and hopefully for you and everyone else, is kind of every now and then stop and think, what is it that you really want? Is this what you want to do? And if not, is there something you can do differently? Is there something you can change? If you're not happy with your work, what can be done? And so forth. And the same applies for education as well. So if things go right, if there's a situation where the student is suffering, or there's something just doesn't click, you need to stop there. You need to meet the student. You need to kind of understand. You need to start to understand the context. And this is my final word on the context bit. But we cannot understand different education systems unless we understand the local context. This applies for Finland, this applies for Saudi Arabia, this applies for everything. And what we actually need is people who are interested in different education systems and who can build those bridges and who can contextualize
100%.
to you, what is it about the Finnish, the sauna and the lakes and stuff?
Right.
And what is it and for you to contextualize to me, what is it here in Saudi Arabia that, how does their society work around education? Otherwise, there's no way to collaborate either.
100%. I mean, this reminds me with one of the 7 habits of Stephen Covey: seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yes.
So if you understand your local entity and your local identity, you can then be, of course, open to the world and the global citizenship at large. Education Finland, and being the program director at Education Finland, what is the scope of that?
Okay, so ever since the PISA study started, 16 years ago, more, almost 20 years ago, Finland has been on focus on educators around the world. And we weren't really prepared for all that interest in Finland. Mm-hmm. And so in 2010, the government started to think, okay, so we need to do something. We as a public entity, we cannot serve the whole globe. We cannot go everywhere, and we are happy to share ideas, but when it comes to helping, when it comes to helping, when it comes to working in partnerships, that doesn't work out on from the government level, or nor from the municipality school provider level. So after several steps, Education Finland was founded in 2018. It was the program was under Business Finland, which is kind of a general expert organization for Finnish companies and entities who want to, export abroad. But because education is a bit different thing, so it was decided that it's better to have that bit under the National Agency for Education. Mm-hmm. So nowadays we have about 125 public and private members under our program. The program is funded separately by the Ministry of Education. And we work together with our members. We provide them information, we provide them training, we build bridges, we build that trust. I mean, in Finland, you take it for face value, but then again, you go to some regions, they might ask, who's this? Should we talk with them? So we kind of work on that angle as well. Right. And we try to find our members, whether they are university, whether they are edtech companies, whether they are consultancy agencies or publishers or whatever. We try to find them local partners that they could work with and bring some bits that are actually, that work in the local context. Usually it requires co-creation, a lot of co-creation. So you need to find a partner who's willing to work on that.
100%. It goes mutual. It goes both ways.
Yes.
So basically, you're the ambassadors of the education or the Finnish education to the world.
Something like that. Yes.
Let's put it this way.
Let's put it that way.
Excellent. We also understand that teacher training is something that is really looked up high to in terms of education, and basically with the requirement of a teacher to step into a classroom, whether that be in the early years program, the middle, high school, they need to finish their master's degree first. This gives really high level of the teaching position and the teaching career in Finland as well. How does teacher training programs help teachers in Finland achieve that level and sustain it?
I think it's the combination of theory. So when you do a master's degree, for example, in education, or whether, if you're a subject teacher, you need to do master's, for example, in the subject that you're teaching, so physics or chemistry or whatever, like English. And then do separate pedagogical studies. But I think it's the combination of that theory alongside training and practice. So if we take a classroom teachers, they will go to that university school where they have regular students and the mentor teachers. The first semester when they start their studies, year one. The studies take about 5 years. So they go back and back and back almost every year. First, it's short period, just kind of, this is what teaching looks like. You get to kind of try your wings a bit. But it's not like in some systems where you do all that other stuff first, and then you have pre-service training bit 6 months at the end or something. And then some of these students might be horrified. They step into the classroom for the first time after 4 years and they say, oh, this is not for me. And that's not actually anything that anyone wants, because those you put in 4 years of your time, and if it's government supported program, they've been putting money on that student to become a teacher. So instead having these steps where the teacher student grows in his role as a teacher, as a mentor, while he's studying also the academics.
Stepwise, and maybe this aligns as well with the assessment approach that you were just mentioning, and not wait until the school ends with a high-stake assessment at the end and fall behind. Yeah,
definitely. So there's if you look at what the first year students do, and then when you look at what the final year students do when they go to classroom. I've been a teacher training in a university teacher training school myself. So it's a big difference. And sometimes it's wonderful to see, when they come to the classroom first time and they are kind of almost shaking and everything, and how their professional identity builds during those 5 years.
100%. Learn by doing.
Learning by doing.
Hands on.
And connecting. I think that's the thing. You still need that research. You need that theory, but combining it.
And see what works well and what wouldn't work in this situation.
Exactly.
Right.
And
definitely.
meeting with parents and all that stuff.
Yeah,
It's done before you graduate.
It's a whole package.
It's the whole package.
100%. Well, Jaakko Skantsi, it has been a pleasure having you in our podcast. Thank you so much for being with us.
Shukran.
Shukran. Thank you. And this was the Educators Clinic.